Welcome back to another edition of Ashes to Apex. Today I have a very special guest, JD Shipley. JD is a father, a husband, a man of faith, and also a starting strength gym owner. JD, thank you for coming on.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So JD, we were talking a little bit before this and getting a little bit background on your story, and very inspiring. Just the journey that you've taken. I just wanted to start off by maybe having you tell us a little bit about starting strength, and then tell us a little bit how you got there in your journey.
Yeah. So starting strength itself is a strength training system that uses barbells to help people get stronger. Right. So you squat, bench, press, deadlift, are the main lifts. You train 3 times a week. You add a little bit of weight over time, and you eat and sleep to recover, and you get stronger. And it's literally that simple, but it is although simple, quite it can be quite difficult. Obviously, because lifting gets heavy, and that requires a lot of intentionality to go in and do something hard. But how I got here, I think we were talking outside. I I've got a degree in civil engineering, got out of school and started working in oil and gas, specifically construction. Was building storage tanks, was working internationally, did a lot of work overseas. And I was good at what I did. I would say, but do all you can to the glory of God, like that way, especially towards the end, wasn't happening. My wife and I, we've been together since my last year in college, and we're fairly athletic, right? We would working out and being active was a part of something that we did together. That was one of the ways that we connected. So we would go train for a half marathon, and we would go do a bunch of cardio in the gym, and then we would do this. And I had what I would call fitness ADD, and we would just kind of jump from one modality to another, and it was based on what looked interesting. And throughout this, we spent roughly 20 years doing that. And I throughout this entire process, I'm a fairly big guy. I'm a tall guy, but I was nowhere near as strong as a guy I thought my size should be. And I was I realized that I was disappointed. Like, that's what I was looking for, and I was disappointed that I didn't have it. But I also realized that I wasn't doing anything specific to get that. And so one day I decided, I'm done with all the running. I'm done with all the cardio. I'm done with all this other stuff. And I am going to lift heavy and see how strong I can get. And that's when I found starting strength. And I started. So I started lifting. Realized quickly that I needed to coach. Started doing online coaching with starting strength, and was working with a coach, and got stronger. And people begin to notice, right? So I get a lot of questions like, dude, what are you doing? You look like you ate your former self. And so I found myself talking about starting strength a lot to the people that I know, and it resonated with some, and friends began to ask, like, hey, how do you do this and how do you do the other? And so I started coaching. I started just coaching some friends here and there, and going with having some friends come with me to the gym, and that sort of thing. And round about that, this time, this is 2016. Right about that time, I came back to my faith. I realized that my relationship with God was not where it needed to be, and that I was one who needed to seek God, because He had been calling, but I was never responding. So I needed to finally respond. And so I say this because I found myself in prayer a lot, asking, like, what is it? What do you want? What am I supposed to be doing? what's my purpose here? And I spent a lot of time asking that question. And I was on a drive home from the office one day, and I guess it was March 2018. I I was lost in prayer. I didn't realize that I was lost in prayer, I was asking that question. What am I supposed to be doing? And I heard, as kooky as this sounds, I heard help people get stronger. And I come from a fairly entrepreneurial background. Like my immediate family and a lot of my extended family are, it's very, there are a lot of entrepreneurs. I was one of the few in my family that was, climbing the corporate ladder and had the 401k and, all that sort of stuff. And I always wanted to strike out on my own. I wanted to do something for, something like that, but I never believed in anything enough to put my family's, financial stability at risk, until this, for me, nothing was more clear. I was gonna, as soon as I heard that, it was like a light bulb. I was gonna quit my job. I was gonna become a strength coach. I was gonna open a gym, and I was gonna help people get stronger. Because what I realized that through the process of training, yes, you get stronger. Yes, you get bigger. The aesthetics like that. Hey, that's great. But you get more resilient. You get healthier. My mental health improved. There's all these things that you could consider secondary benefits that are actually primary benefits for people. The things that people don't have that they actually spend a lot of time and money chasing. And I was like, man, like this is it. And so I knew it was the right. I knew that I was on the right path when I told my wife, because my wife my wife's very, she's very detail oriented. She's very conservative. She's not the risk taker of the house. All right. I'm I get half a plan together, and we're gonna jump in feet first and figure out the rest of it along the way. And she's not that way. And so I came home and I said, hey, I'm gonna quit my job and I'm gonna open a gym and I'm gonna become a strength coach, and this is what I'm gonna do. And she's like, let's go. Has no doubts in her mind, wasn't worried.
So while you were going, so it sounds like I always ask in marketing, it's like, what are you selling? What are you really selling? And
Sure.
And you help people get stronger, but you're also selling transformation. Did you feel like you were going through a transformation yourself during that time?
Did I feel like it at the time? No.
No.
But so that was 2016, March of 2016 when that happened. By September of 2000, March of 18 when that happened. September of 18, by that time I quit and was working, was moving into coaching full time. And by December of that year, I had signed the agreement with Starting Strength Gyms to open 2 locations in Houston. And I would say, as far as a process of transformation, like it has been nothing but growth since then. Physical growth, right? Obviously getting stronger. I'm not the same person that I was in 2016. Hopefully wasn't the same person that I was, even 5 years ago. Like it's all definitely been a growth process.
Yeah. And having to lead a gym, I'm sure you have other trainers that you lead. What has it been like balancing the different personalities?
So we are service. We provide a service, right? So we don't, there isn't a thing that we sell. And so it's the people that provide that service. So our people are, our biggest asset. But like any business, right? People are, when you put people together, that's where the source of conflict comes up, right? So it's definitely been, I think the biggest point of growth, for me is learning how to manage people, but not only that, like making, I think the biggest thing that has made a difference in that is um making sure that I am who I need to be able to lead the people around me, right? Because I expect something from anybody if I'm not willing to meet those expectations myself. And I think that's been the biggest the biggest source of heartache is making sure that I'm the leader that I need to be.
Right.
That's very nebulous. I mean, but for anybody who's gone through it, I think it
Do you feel like
makes sense to them.
do you feel like that that growth, just having to be a leader and be a leader for possibly even other leaders, right? Do you feel like that has made an impact on you as a father and a husband as well? Or you've seen real
Well, no, I think it started with being um being the person I need to be to be a husband, right? So being oil and gas and traveling overseas, my wife and I, our career paths went like this, and we spent a bunch of time apart during the first part of our marriage, and it tore our marriage apart. And so we had to spend a bunch of time, or I'm sorry, I had to really do a lot of looking within to fix the problems that I was bringing to the marriage. Which I think when my kids then came along, um, I found myself towering over a 2-year-old, yelling at him, and then realized that, like, one, whatever process I had gone through to reconcile my relationship with my wife, like, needed to be continued, because I wasn't bringing that into my relationship with my kids, right? And then now, um, so that process, the continuing that process is really what it's been dealing, interacting with my team, my employees. That has been an extension of the process that I've gone through, and really reconciling my who I need to be for my kids. Because who I was before just wasn't, it wasn't a good dad.
Hmm. Well, we're all we're all growing, you know.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we all make mistakes. We all have things we look back on that we're not proud of, but I think it's more about the journey than anything, right? Like God's got us on a path, and as long as we're pursuing that purpose. And that was going to be my next point is what was that like? I mean, you went from stability, feeling like you had stability, but not really, because at the end of the day, your marriage was struggling and the foundation of your life was really at risk. Um, but so what was that transition like, going from that situation where financial stability seemed to be secure, but now you're going into something where you felt like you were more in line with your purpose?
Uh, Again, it's all growth, because at the end of the day, it's not, nothing's guaranteed. And I remember, right. So when I told my wife, right, about all this, she was on board immediately. But, to her credit, right, one of the things that she said was, so how, like, what's the next step? What are you going to do? And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to quit. And she's like, we have, we're dual income. And so, maybe we should figure out how to be on one income for a while, before before you go jumping into this. Right. So, we spent, the next 6 months, kind of getting, paring things down, um, and tightening up where we needed to be. Um, And through that process, a little while later, we sold our house and downsized, into where we are now. So kind of further consolidate that. Um, because we're jumping in and spending a bunch of money on franchise fees and build outs and payroll, and making sure that you've got a certain amount of operating expenses, operating capital to cover to cover, so many months worth of, no income, or, that sort of thing, to come up with a kind of like a worst case scenario. And so you look at, even though we had gone through that process of consolidating, we're still looking at this like, hey, there's a possibility here that, like, this is the amount of money that we can lose. And for me, I think what helped was we were opening, so we're opening the Houston location. We're going through the process of, getting the website built out, and, getting the website taken care of, and we're doing the build out for the gym, and we've got a date set, we've got a hard date set for opening. So with that hard date, we can open up signups for, pre-opening. And we were going to open the signups on Monday, and the guy who was ahead of tech, the head of tech at Sonic Shrink Gyms, opened the signups Sunday night, right? So Monday morning, like, we're hitting the ground running. And I remember climbing into bed. It was 10 o'clock Sunday night, and I got a ding on my phone, and I grabbed my phone on the bed table, and I saw so and so signed up, and I thought, like, what? Like, again, it's these little things of like, I'm asking you to step out in faith. I'm asking you to do this, right? And these little, you call it breadcrumbs, right? Breadcrumbs of, I got you. Like, this is, you're going to be okay, right? It was the first one was my wife. The next one was for getting that, figuring out staffing, before we opened. And really, when we got that sign up, I was like, man, something about that to me just completely relieved a lot of the fear around cash flow, right? It was just one sign up, but it just something about it was like, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna have to work, right? You're gonna work, but I got this.
Yeah, it was just like a little piece of comfort, just to show you, hey, I've got this, right? So it sounds like the transition that you made, it all started with faith.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you mentioned that, you really kind of gotten back. It was you'd reclaimed your faith, right? And then from that point on, everything led to that. About how long was it from the time that you really started, I guess, talking to God again and reclaiming your faith? Did that? How long of a journey was that before you decided to open up the gym?
I think it was the end of 2016. Yeah. When it dawned on me that, so I grew up Catholic, grew up going to church.
Okay.
Grew up, I knew that God existed, but it was always like this, it was always, I knew I should go to church, and I knew there was something more that I was needing to do. Right. But I kept thinking, when my faith gets stronger, then I'll go back to God. It's kind of like, when I lose weight, then I'll diet. Right. It's like, not, and I realized, there's something about traffic, man. I realized that in another instance in traffic on my way to work. Right. I realized I'm completely backwards here. Right. I've got to be the one to go after, like, God's been calling. I could look back, and there's all these instances where, God was there, but I was ignoring those, those calls. Right. Until, this one here, like, I realized that I need to be the one to do that. And I think that was sometime the end of 2016 when we started going back to, my wife had just started going back to church. It was a couple, she'd gone to a couple services, a couple weekends before that. And she kept telling me about, she told me about this church that's here in the Woodlands. and that it was a Bible church, and so they go through a book of the Bible, kind of at a time. Uh, and I was used to like topical sermons, and so they're like, you go through a book, like what does that mean? I didn't even realize that was a thing. And she's like, yeah, they're going over Song of Solomon. And I was like, wait a minute, like, what is that? And she's like, it's about sex. I was like, oh, we're going to church next week. I want to go to this church. And so that was the end of sometime around the end, the back half of 2016.
So you say that the biggest difference that you notice between going from, I mean, I'm sure from that Catholic background to, not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm sure you can have a personal relationship with God through Catholicism as well. But point is you feel like your situation specifically, it was the difference was the personal relationship with God, or
Yeah. So I was baptized and confirmed Catholic. I went to the catechism, and I did the confirmation and all that sort of stuff. And the question of a personal relationship with God was not ever, it wasn't anything that was ever explicitly or intentionally discussed. But I remember my grandmother, my grandparents lived with us for a few years when I was in high school, and my grandmother was very very devout, and well, I'm not going to say devout Catholic, but she had a personal relationship with Jesus.
yes,
And she would walk around praying, and it was like mumbling. I was like, what's wrong with her? Like, you should do it. But I look, and I say this to say that with any denomination, you could have a personal relationship with Jesus, right? Like, before the Jews were Jews, right? There are people in the Bible that walked with God, right? And so it doesn't matter what your denomination is, right? There's people that seek God. And I realize that, like, Catholic or non-denominational or Baptist, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Like, but the goal, the deal is not the goal, but like what we should be doing is running after God, pulling, walking with God.
mm. Yeah, that it's interesting because a lot of all the entrepreneurs I've interviewed, they talk about pretty much all of them started the business because it was driven by faith.
No.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic because you have the other side of it too, where it's just all about money and while money is necessary, right, to support your family, where that place where it comes from, right? It's like, is it coming from a place of desire for more, or is it coming from a place because I feel like I have a calling?
Yeah.
How is when would you say that your focus when you were in oil and gas was more on money and security than it is now as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. I so now as a coach, as a business owner, I'm the worst. I am the worst coach of my team. Everybody, as it should be, they're much better. But as a business owner who has clients, who has members who come to us for, to get stronger, right? We're at ground zero for the benefit that we are able to help our members achieve, right? 60-year-old women reverse an osteoporosis diagnosis, right? And it's fantastic, right? So we're able to help to help somebody rehab through an injury, or or to get stronger going into surgery, and then come out of surgery, and then get back to rehab, and kind of get back to where they were, and beforehand, right? We're able to we stories all the time of prior to coming in, for example, prior to coming in, I was afraid that I was going to fall, And then, now the other day I had to get my dog to the vet, veterinarian, and my husband wasn't here. And, so I picked him up and I put him in the car. Right? The dog weighs 50 pounds. Right. And so like, this, just this restoration of capability, right. That we're able, people are able to, to reclaim, the quality of life that that they had lost. And we're right there. Whereas before, with oil and gas, yeah, it's great, right? There's, what we were doing was helping to drive progress forward, but we're 3, 4, 5, 6 layers removed. And what we do see is, the corporate bottom line, right? We see, you got a project, you got a budget, can you deliver it, ahead of schedule? And, if you got this much of margin in there, can you deliver it with, a little bit more margin, right? And improve the bottom line.
Right. And I just think it's interesting because um, I would say that most people probably think of entrepreneurs or business owners as people that are really just chasing after more money, right? And to see someone that goes from a stable job, from that world, and then decides, hey, that's not doing it for me. And it's really what drove you to entrepreneurship wasn't necessarily the money; it was purpose.
Yep.
So, I just wanted to underscore that because I think that a lot of people don't see that perspective, right? Um, and I think that entrepreneurship is much more about purpose than it is about money. And
It should.
especially if you're good at what you do, and it's like, well, are you impacting the world, right?
Yeah. Well, hopefully form follows function, right? Like you pursue something because there's, there you find purpose in it, and you can find a way uh to disseminate it, roll it out, whatever the verb is, in such a way that you're compensated adequately for it.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to say, just, for me, this is a calling, right? I do believe that this is a calling, but just because it's a calling does not mean that long term it's going to be blessed financially, to the way I would like it to be done. Right. That's not at the end of the day, that is not ultimate, right? I'll work, and I will be, a prudent and a good steward of the, the money that we make. But at the end of the day, it may not be as successful as I want it. Right. So that may not be God's plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which would be easier to say now,
Right.
and harder to deal with later on. Right. If it happens. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. What's been your biggest challenge so far, since you've gone into business for yourself?
I think buckling down and being, figuring out how to run a business. I think, we've got 2 locations. I got great staff. I have, I think roles and responsibilities are divided out. And I think I understood academically, right? I understood, dividing up roles and responsibilities such that like the day-to-day tasks are done and don't depend on me. But that's also led to a situation where I now have time, right? Time to go out and do business development, time to go out and, network and, develop relationships and sit down and, do the work of like, is this business a system that runs well, without me? Like, are all the systems in place? Like, are all the systems articulated? Are all the, the procedures and the things that we do on a day-to-day basis, like, are they standardized? That I think that has, as opposed to, well, I can go work out today, or I can go, like, I cannot do anything right now. Right. And then later on today, nothing's going to happen. Right. And that's, but 3 months from now, whenever I need the thing that's in place, like now, maybe I'm suffering as a result of not having this system articulated like that. I think that's, buckling down and and working on the business, I think has been probably the biggest challenge.
So, do you feel like there was any like critical step that you had to take? Maybe it was a certain specific type of hire, or some sort of delegation. But was there a specific step that you felt like was most crucial for you to be able to step back and see your business from outside looking in?
I mean, I think it's been a couple things. I hired a very good friend of mine to do to be an admin, like a executive assistant, right? To take off of my plate the things that need to get done for the business to run, but that do not relate to are not income producing activities, right? So for a while, like, I was running payroll, which obviously payroll needs to be done, right? But it's a process that it's repetitive, that somebody else can take care of that. So I think that helped. The critical hires. One, I think it was more of a realization that, like, the income's good, things are good, right? But from a growth perspective, am I doing what I should be doing to make it better, right? And I always, I always, I would look at my books and think, like, am I have I got to the point where, like, there's no more growth, right? And the answer to that question is always no. But I was like, well, what do I do? And I hired a coach as well, business coach, to basically what it is. It's an accountability.
I was gonna, yeah.
As a 46-year-old, as a grown up, it still urged me to say that I need an accountability partner, but I need somebody to help hold me accountable, because I'm not successful in doing that on my own.
Totally. No, I get that. So are there any other techniques that you picked up that help you stay disciplined and focused on, like, a routine or anything like that you do?
I would say, I think AI has really helped.
Yeah.
Because so in terms of, like, let's write a procedure, and let's write how do you formalize a system for closing leads to convert them to members, right? Like, that would take me. One of the reasons why I didn't do it is because, like, I don't know where to start, right? And so with AI, like, I can give it a bunch of information, and then it starts to what would take me, years, a year worth of dragging my feet and not doing. It spat out a starting point in literally, less than a minute. And then from there, like, I could see, well, I don't like that, so let's change that. And I don't like that, and let's change that. And I like this, so let's keep this. And so I didn't have to, my biggest block was, drafting from white space, like, blank sheet of paper. Like, I don't know what to write. I don't even know where to start, right? But this gave me a starting point that I could then modify and get to a point where, like, I can say, that's it. This is what we need to roll out, or this is what I need to bring my team in on now and say, here's what I'm thinking. Help me pressure test this. Like, what do you guys think? Right.
Yeah.
Business, like, one of the first people that I coached, prior to opening the gym, was an older gentleman. He was a CEO of his company. He had several iterations of businesses. Went through a bankruptcy. Started a company. Started a procurement services company, and then sold it for a bunch of money. And as the first gym was getting to a point where it was being built, I was charged. I forget what I was charging him. Nothing compared to the benefit that I was getting out of the conversations with him. And I told him, hey, Denny, like I get more out of this than than you than you're paying me for, right? I'd love to continue this relationship. I know as far as you coaching people like a business coach, like I couldn't afford that. So like, how would I'd love to continue this relationship. And he said, I you know I work for food, right? So once a month, we meet and we chat and over breakfast. And um one of the things there's a number of things that stuck out of what he said, but one of the things that he said is like, you as a business leader, business owner, you need time to sit and think and work through the stuff that you've got, the issues that you're dealing with, the problems that you've got. You have to have time to be able to process through that, right? And that's work. That's working time, because it just you sit there and you think and you're like, I could be doing payroll, or I could be making calls, or I could be could be in the gym talking to my to my members and to my staff, right? And so that feels very selfish to carve some of that time out. But I think so. It's sometimes it takes some me giving myself permission to be like, you just chill.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. When I first started building a team, I remember feeling guilty for having to step back and do other types of work. I felt like I needed to be in the mix. It sounds like you experience a similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just get in the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Right. Yeah. 100%. No, I mean, I totally agree with that. I've trained up a guy to basically replace me. Right. And now, it's like I'll go and review his work. I'm like, I don't know if I have much to add to this, or if I'm just going to mess up the process. Or...
So it's seagull management, right? You stand in and do a bunch of squawking and poop all over.
Exactly. Or
fly out, say somebody else clean up the mess.
I definitely had to learn how to not do that. Right. Where I've seen where I need, when there's a situation where you just can't really get it over the edge, like a project that we're working on and just can't, that's where I come in. I'll come in and I'll be that support still. And I'll be like, hey man, you're leading this project. So how can I help you lead? Right. And that's also been challenging because it's my business but I've found that, building your employees to be leaders is more effective than having them just be task doers, right? What's, I guess, do you feel like you have a similar dynamic as starting strength with your trainers?
Yeah, I mean, you asked me earlier about extreme ownership, and so everybody, I'm trying to think if I have it. Everybody that has worked for me, I have given a copy of Extreme Ownership and the Dichotomy of Leadership, because I don't think that you can. I don't know that there's any other way.
No.
Right. Kind of like I said earlier. Like if I want my team to to meet these expectations, but I don't, then everything else is irrelevant. Yeah. Some people are looking for more, for more responsibility. Some people are happy with a certain amount, right? And I think one of the things that I've had to learn is to meet people where they're at. This is going to sound bad by saying, not expect too much of them, but it's not to expect, not everybody wants the level of responsibility that I've taken on, right? So it's unreasonable to think that everybody's gonna want the same level of accountability for.
Not everybody can care about your business as much as you do. They're not going to, right?
And I think in many aspects, right? One of the, my team has had, my team's taught me that there's aspects of the business that I did not realize would need to be valued. That was way more important than what I was given it, right? So certainly I think that's one of the biggest things. But yeah, it's trying to, for me, it's been trying to instill a culture of extreme ownership, in the sense that, like, what we're going to do, in what we're going to do, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be difficulties, right? And where we start to resolve that is in ourselves first, and then we work on our external relationships.
Yeah, when I read extreme ownership, it was a complete game changer for me. I mean, it changed my mindset completely to the point where, I mean, everything was my fault, sure, but when you have that perspective, um, it just constantly, it could be the other person could have been completely on their own, done something completely crazy, and just whatever, right? And but still trying that mindset of reflecting, trying to figure out where I could have changed something, where I could have done something different. That was the game changer, right? Doesn't mean I didn't still hold it accountable, sure, right? But I certainly thought about it differently, and it gave me more control over my emotions in those situations. Because if everything's my fault, I have no reason to get mad, right? I'm still calm. I mean, I might be a little sad about something. It's natural, but it is, yeah.
It's empowering. Whereas before, right, like if you and I have conflict, right, and then something goes wrong, if I don't have, if you don't have that ownership mindset, then now I'm a victim. Like, Josh, you did this, and my life is not, or my problems exist because of something you did. Well, like, yeah, you contributed to it, yes, but if I'm going to take ownership of it, like, I now at least have control of my response.
Right.
Right. And there's something that could be done there, as opposed to being a victim of the whims of someone else.
Right. In some cases, taking extreme ownership may be, hey, I let this go on for too long, right? And sometimes you have to make cuts, where they need to be made. But there's always some sort of accountability that you can take for yourself in those situations. So that's the biggest thing I learned from that. Love that book. I really do. Yeah. Yeah. Good call though. Also, getting all of your team, because that's what I meant. Like, you're shaping them as leaders by giving them that book, having them read that book, and learning how to, just take accountability for your own actions. Right?
I think so. I think part of it too is giving being explicit with the team about, like, where I want to be, which gives them the permission to say, like, hey, that thing, that's not meeting, that's not living up to your expectation, right? And so if if we're at a point where we can, even the person on the lowest part of the totem pole can call out, call out a problem, or can call out whether leaders are not living up to their own stated values, then I think you're doing something right.
How involved is your team in the overall mission and just
a vision question?
Yeah.
So I just now, we opened the first gym in August 2019, and I just now put together the vision, mission, and values, because I'm just at a point now where I can actually articulate it. And it's been 6 years, like how I'm almost ashamed. Like, it sounds bad that, like, it would go that long because so everything that's on there I knew, but I could just never articulate it. And I would say, thanks to AI, because it helping kind of think yourself process. I'm right doing it. But so how involved? I would say, very involved, right? It was, we talk about challenges. I 2-3 days after I finished, I finished and I got it to where I wanted. And I was like, we were doing like a sales training on one of our team calls, and I said, hey, like, instead of doing sales training, like, I got all this information, for the sales stuff, consultative selling, but if we don't have the why, then none of this matters, right? So like here's what we got, guys. Like, and we can talk through it a little bit. A couple of days after that, I saw a meme on Instagram. It was like a video on Instagram. It was like one of these AI generated things, and it was some guy saying, well, he was on his deathbed or something like that. He was like, one of the things that I really regret in life is not aligning more to the company vision plan. Oh my gosh. But you're gonna have we're gonna have people that are not that they're not aligned, but it's like they're gonna look at it and say, yeah, sure, yes, like everything you say is good, yeah, right? But whether or not they believe it internally or like really embody it, maybe that's a different story. And so, but I wrote it more for myself because I had an issue where I caused an issue with one of my members, all right, and one of my team, one of my staff, called it out. He's like, man, like, this was an issue, and I was like, and so it was really meaningful for me because if nothing else, right, if because you're gonna have people that are completely aligned, it's gonna be a spectrum, right? You're gonna people that take it on and that's their operating system. And there's other people that like, yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? Like I could get with that. But for me, it was something that I could look at and remind myself every day that like, this is why we're doing it. And this is how I'm going to, this is how I'm gonna act. And then our, values, some of the values, I wouldn't say contradict, but like some of the values is like our member experience and the accountability, like, not that they contradict, but they have to be balanced, right? You can go so far to one side that now this value is not being maintained, right? So it's a balancing act with all of them. And so I realized that I had let certain values get out of hand and wasn't keeping my client's experience also top of mind, because that was also important. And so I wrote that more for me, right? And it also helps to ask, it gives me a formal guideline of, or not a guideline, but a guide, guidepost to say, right, like, this thing that we're doing, this thing that I'm doing, or this thing that so and so is doing, does it fit the mission, right? Does it fit our values, right? And if not, like, if I'm going to give feedback, right, it was like I can point to, like, this is what we believe, this right here, right? Yeah. And so because we didn't have that previously.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just the will of JD.
That's how it comes off. It comes off as whims, right? It comes off as, if not a whim, then a moving target, which is not like, there's no way to set up a team for success, right? It's like, what are you going to do? What do you expect them to do if they don't know what target they're aiming for?
Right. Yep. Yeah. So how big of an impact do you feel like having the mission values, and how big of an impact do you feel like it's had on your business? Where you still kind of seeing how that's
Well, yeah, I just formalized them a few weeks ago. So.
If it's still worth it, you'll get back to me on that one.
Yeah, no, it's I think it's at a point where, like, I don't know that there's a whole lot more tweaks to it.
Yeah.
And if there are changes, then it's it's word changes, right, to kind of reinforce something, or to reinforce something. But yeah, we just started, so we'll see.
Yeah. Do you feel like the your staff and your employees, do they feel grateful or happy that you are implementing something like that, or do you feel like you're getting buy-in from it, or
Yeah,
that
yeah. I think I've got buy-in.
buy-in?
And I think if not buy-in, then hopefully it serves as a mechanism for somebody to say, like, that's not, I don't think that there's anybody there's nobody on the team that doesn't need to be there, right? So but at some point, if hopefully it serves as like uh, a gateway, maybe yeah, what do they call them, a decision gate,
Yeah.
for some of.
I'm really leaning into this to the mission and values because
Yeah.
number one, you just started doing it, right? Number two, I can tell that you're passionate about it and you're excited about it, which you should be.
Yeah.
How could you see yourself now that you've formed that and you're going in that direction? Could you see yourself growing and being able to step back from the business without having that guidance?
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
Right.
Um, every single one of those, everything that we put down, that everything that I put down as far as, as far as the vision, the mission, and all the various values. And then there's also like a primary, like the things that I try to balance when making any sort of like, significant decision. That's all stuff that had been rattling around in my head and some of my team's head for years. Right. But it was never formalized, and it was probably never even articulated until then. And I remember having a conversation with one of my team, and we were talking about, good Lord, what were we talking about? I forget what we were talking about, but he said we were talking about the client's experience and, I'd like in general, the client experience, right? Because we do a very, very hard thing, right? And, we have a very high level, high standard for the coaching, right? There's a lot of precision, and then there's a lot of like, one of the things that makes starting strength, what it is that there's no fluff. Like in an industry that's full of Instagram butt models, like this cuts through all that. There's no BS, right? And so it can get very, very hard and very, matter of fact, right? And the flip side, and so if someone is like paying to come do this thing, right? And it's just all difficult, right? Like why, a lot of people are going to decide to not do that. And then it's counter to the idea that like, consistency is the main thing, right? So we were having a conversation. This was like a couple weeks, last week, if not a couple weeks ago. We were having a conversation, and one of the things that he said was he said that like it's all hard, but then if we don't take the client's experience into it, like why are they going to come, right? And I said, how long have you been how long had you been thinking that? He's like, I mean, we've been doing this for the last 6 years, but I just now formally processed that to be able to articulate it, right? And so, if I think to have a business that works, right, a business the business is viable, you need replicability, right? And without some of this stuff, to do that, you have systems and SOPs and all that sort of stuff. But a lot of that stuff doesn't really matter if you don't understand why, right? And like our guiding things, and you can't disseminate that the ethos out across multiple people to be able to get all the SOPs and the systems and stuff to work the way they should if people aren't aligned on why.
Have you started building a leadership team in your organization? Yeah. Has that been a game changer at all? Having other leaders in place? Has it been
Well, if it's all,
or challenging in the
I mean, it's challenging. One, I think,
maybe letting go too a little bit, letting go control.
so we're not a we're we got 7 of us,
Right.
oh, so we're not a very, 7 of us across 2 gyms. We're not a very big team, right? So at the end of the day, it's not a big enough organization to be, for me to be like, right, you like,
You're still in the business. Yeah, right. You're still in it. Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah. 100%.
absolutely. What I would like, what I wanted to do when we first started running was to run as if we had 5, 6, 7 locations,
Right.
so that when it came time to open those locations, like the step change of scaling, wasn't it, you know, it like we didn't have to go through those growing pains. Like a lot of that stuff was kind of already in there. But you can only do so much of that until you actually have, multiple locations.
So you have a vision, you've got a plan, you know where you want to be.
Sure.
How challenging is it sometimes to stay in the moment and just focus on the day to day when you want to be over there, right?
Ask that question in a different way, and again, a different way is because the answer, it's fairly easy, but I think I have a
Right.
different perspective.
Okay, okay, I'll change the question by I'll tell you how I
Yeah.
deal with it. Um, so I know where I want to be. Um, I know where I want to grow my business, and I want to get there fast. And I want to,
Sure.
fast and furious. but but um, but I know that I have to focus on the systems um every single day. Like focusing on the process rather than focusing on the end goal at all times. Right. Um, I think sometimes when I put so much of my focus on the end goal, um, I get a little bit discouraged because it's so far away, right? And I've had to train myself to just focus on the systems to get there, systems that will get me to the goal, right?
Um, I think it's a little different because the data, like I said, we're at ground zero for the benefit that we're imparting, and every member is an individual story, in and of itself. Like it's an individual relationship. Um, so I think being able to stay in the day to day, one to me, that's what the fun is. Like I get to, you go in and you're coaching, you get to hang out with people with people that are you know conservative, liberal, like whatever different beliefs, right? Atheists, religious, like what there's a whole spectrum. But at the end of the day, everybody in there is aligned on the thing that we're doing, right? To be getting stronger, to make life out, to make everyday life easier. Right. So I get to go in and spend time with people that are aligned with me on that goal. And I get to do it with people that are aligned with me and wanting to help other people do that, right? My coaches.
Yeah,
So like that's the fun part.
right.
That there's a lot of enjoyment in being there because I get to see people I get to hang out with my members, right? It's great.
Yeah, kind of like a big family. Yeah,
Mhm.
cool. Um, so if you had any piece of advice just for an entrepreneur that's trying to, um, well, make a decision to go out or I mean, what from what you've learned over the past 6 years since you've started your business, I mean, what would it be?
Oh man. Um yeah, so I think my answer is going to be faith based, right? Like I would say, one, what is the problem that you're trying to, like, what is the problem that you're trying to be solved, that you're trying to solve, and does it need solving, right? And the two, is that what you're being called to do,
Mhm.
right? And I would say, don't rush into an answer.
Uh, That's key. Yeah, key patience is key. Um, I don't think that there's any other way that you could look at it though, coming from a place of faith, right? I mean, it's got to be faith driven. I I've thought about that quite a bit because during the initial, because I still feel like I'm figuring out the mission and purpose of this podcast, right, as we're going along, and I was like, I really want to reach entrepreneurs. I don't want to necessarily make this all about Christianity or sure entrepreneurship. There are people in all different places, and they all need to hear these stories. Um, but I find myself feeling challenged at times because uh, my story comes from a place of faith, right? And it's hard for me to tell that, tell a story any other way, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's just an interesting perspective and dynamic. Um, and but I think um, so do you ever you coming from a place of faith, being sort of purpose driven, right? From that place, uh, it sounds like the commonality or the common thing that you have with your other members or your team coming from all different walks of life is you all want to help people get stronger,
Yeah.
right? Uh, Coming from a place of faith, though, do you ever feel like maybe it doesn't matter as much in the organization if you're in, but do you ever feel like there's challenge or conflict there? Maybe not so much outward conflict, but just kind of internal. Um,
You mean, so you mean like if so that there is definitely.
like, you want maybe you want to lead from a faith perspective, but you have to be careful with what you say and do around other.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think that's definitely a challenge. That's an internal conflict that I got because I want everybody to know about Jesus and his what he did for us as sinners by dying on the cross and taking that on as as a substitute for us and reconciling us to God.
right.
And I know that were I to say that in the gym, especially actively, like repeatedly multiple times, that I would have members that would decide not to come back, right? And so there's definitely a pull between sharing the gospel, right, and pushing something on somebody that they don't want, right? Um, there's also the aspect of like who's grace for, right? Grace is for the sinners and the lost, right? And I am one of those sinners and the lost as well, right? So there's definitely that side of it. I mean, I've asked a number of times, like, am I being faithful with what I'm being called to do by not being more, evangelical? Now, I don't know if I don't know that I'm being called to be an evangelist, right? So
You feel like that maybe you evangelize through your example.
well, that's part of it, right? So if somebody asks me, then I will not shy away from sharing my faith and my own story of salvation, right? And who I was before, and right, who I continue to be, which is why I still need Jesus and need that salvation. Um, and so and as far as an example, right? I think one of the biggest areas, well, not areas of growth, but like one of the biggest things that I do is um making sure that when it comes to conflict, right? When it comes to like things with staff and like the how we deal with stuff, right? Is first and foremost, am I looking at my staff the way Jesus looks at them, right? The way like they're whether they believe it, whether they like wherever their beliefs are, they're still a child of God, right? And God loves that person. And so regardless of whatever the correct course of action for the thing that, whatever the conflict is, like that is still a human being made in the image of God. Right. And I need to make sure that I keep that first and foremost. Right. And so in terms of leading by example, I think that's one of the ways, I've had a lot of, quite a few conversations. Like that's one of the ways that I make sure that I'm being faithful to my calling. Right. And it also times like this, like we're talking about work, but faith for me is very much part of it. So, when it comes time to like this, it's not something that I shy away from.
Right.
So,
No, I mean,
a lot of my members know, you know, my my leanings and kind of where I'm coming from. And, well, I hope they do anyway. But I watch this, maybe they will.
yeah, right. No, I mean I I've had my fair share of battles and like internal battles trying to um wanting to express what I believe in my faith, but being worried about what it is that customer going to care or sure, or sure. And some people have real issue with it, but I've learned that you just have to be yourself. You have to embody that. You have to be who you are, um, and not be ashamed of that. It's um, and I've learned that people tend to actually respect you more for it, right? At the end of the day, right? Oh man, um, it's thank you for coming on.
You're welcome.
It's been a really encouraging conversation. I've learned a lot myself just from listening to you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me about it. Is there how can we find you? Is there a website?
Yeah, I think so if you go if you Google starting strength Houston or starting strength Katy, you'll find us. And so we're on Instagram, Facebook. I need to get better about LinkedIn, but it's just I'm not a good social media person. But yeah, the websites are the best way to find us. Starting strength Houston and starting strength Katy.
Awesome. All right. Well, JD, thank you for coming on again. Really appreciate it. And if you need to, you can. If you need to find us, Ashes to Apex, you can find us on Instagram, YouTube, anywhere you get your podcasts. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great one.